Hi everyone, my name is Valeria Flores. I'm a program officer at MHPSS.net. And on behalf of MHPSS.net, I'm delighted to welcome you to the second webinar in our short series titled The Power of Togetherness, Community-Based Group Work with Refugees and Survivors of Human Rights Abuses. Today we're going to have featuring contributors to an edited volume that brings together remarkable examples of practice from across the globe. Today, the webinar will be hosted by two of the editors of the volume. So we have Robin Edward Biggs and Rebecca Horn. Robin is a systemic family therapist who has worked with survivors of human rights abuses since 2001 with a focus on group work. He is based in Cumbria in the UK, working with refugees organizations and running a charity supporting young people living with cancer. And Rebecca, who is an independent psychosocial specialist. Her focus is primarily on community-based approaches to mental health and psychosocial well-being in humanitarian settings, particularly with population affected by conflict and displacement. Now we're going to start the webinar. I'm going to give the floor to Robin.
Okay, thanks so much, Valeria. It's great to see people joining, to see people introducing themselves, and really excited to be having this bring us all together for this second webinar. Hopefully some of you were also at the first one, which took place in September, and which you can actually go back and see if you weren't there. It's on the MHPSS.net YouTube channel, so do check that out. So as Valeria said, I'm one of the 4 co-editors of the book, Group Work with Refugees and Survivors of Human Rights Abuses, The Power of Togetherness. And so today, Rebecca and other co-editors and I are going to be moderating this second webinar. And we're bringing together some of the authors from the 2 sections, sections 2 and 3 of the book, to talk about the different themes that come up there, which I'll talk about in a moment. Just looking at the chapters in the last few days, I noticed that chapter 11, which is actually by one of our contributors today that we'll introduce in a moment, but it starts with, I think the second sentence there says, in this time of collective global crisis. And it just struck me how this is so apparent right now as we witness the awful levels of loss of life and human rights abuses in Israel and Palestine, which are affecting so many people at the moment. Of course, those directly involved and their loved ones most of all, but also everyone connected to that region and beyond, all those who care about human rights. And through the work that all of you here are doing, which is the subject of this book that we're discussing, obviously, we know that human rights abuses take place daily, all the time, often ignored or poorly represented by the media, or simply just hidden from view. So in the broadest sense, I think that's why we're here, to witness and to show solidarity to all those affected in all the different parts of the world. More specifically, we're here today focusing, as I said, on sections 2 and 3 of the book. So section 2 is called Body and Soul, and section 3 is called Together Through Talk. So the aim was to distinguish between chapters that focused on communication and connection through talking and the spoken word, and then chapters that focused on broader activities as a means of bringing people together. I mean, for anyone who's looked in even brief detail, but you can probably see that those things are hard to distinguish. And actually, all of the chapters involve a measure of both that spoken word and an activity and bringing together and making connection through doing together. But maybe that's something that will come out in the discussion with the authors today. So we're going to start, the structure for today is we're going to start with an informal discussion between the authors, the contributors here today. I'll introduce them in a moment. But for those who are here today as participants, you're so welcome. And although we have the system, obviously, where not everybody is able to unmute and come in a speaking way, please do get involved through the chat, adding your comments, your thoughts as we're going through this, and particularly any questions that you have that we can pick up with the contributors in the last half hour of the webinar today. So please do get involved, and we really look forward to hearing what your thoughts are and questions that you might have and comments you might have from your own contexts. Okay, so let me do some introductions of the people who are here as contributors today. So we have Wei Wang, who's a child protection licensed mental health professional, and who is the author of the chapter Connecting Hearts and Minds, a faith-sensitive psychosocial group model. You're really welcome, Wei. Then we have, and you'll be hearing directly from obviously these people in a moment, but let me just go through who we have here. Then we have Peggy Malungo, who's a cross-cultural mental health practitioner, lecturer, and researcher with a focus on women and young girls who experience mental distress related to male violence, and is based in Support Our Sisters project in Greater Manchester. And Peggy is authored the chapter Voicing the Unspoken, Support Our Sisters, a model of group work for women affected by female genital mutilation. Very welcome, Peggy. And then we have Kirsten Lamb, who works as a clinical psychologist in the NHS mental health services and in the voluntary sector and in the UK. And Kirsten's also one of our co-editors, so really good to see you as well as Kirsten. And Kirsten authored the chapter Healing Through Connecting, the Life of a Tamil English Therapy Group for Male Survivors of Torture. And welcome, Kirsten. Then we have Jeremy Diatakola, sorry for bad pronunciation, who works with Freedom of Torture as a senior service user engagement coordinator. He's pastor of the House of Prayers in Manchester, as well as a singer and the author of the song Ngunda Azali Mutu. So really welcome, Jeremy. Jeremy was associated with the Stone Flowers chapter. So that's Stone Flowers, a music group with refugee survivors of torture based in Manchester, and we look forward to hearing more about that. Do check out on YouTube Stone Flowers. There are amazing performances that you can find there of the music and the shows that they put on. Really impressive. And then we have Amanda Bingley, was a research fellow and then lecturer in health research at Lancaster University until 2020. Welcome, Amanda. Good to see you. And Amanda was the author, or the co-author, in fact, for Homelands and New Lands, Art Making with Refugee Survivors of Human Rights Abuses. Great to have you here. And then we have Martha Orbach, an artist and community gardener working with plants and communities since 2010, along with Mary Raffaeli, who's a group analytic psychotherapist with extensive experience working with victims of trafficking, torture, and domestic violence. And great to see you both. And but Mary and Martha co-authored together the chapter Seeds of Hope, which look forward to hearing about as well. And then I think lastly we have Enda McClare, which was chapter 11, in fact, of that what I started off with, the quote about the collective global crisis. And Enda has authored the chapter Adversity, Therapeutic, Witnessing, and the Arts, and works for the World Food Programme as a staff counsellor. And we look forward to hearing about your work as well and your thoughts on this. So that's our contributors today. Really, really welcome. And I will, unless I'm forgetting anything, Valeria and Rebecca, I will hand over to you, Rebecca, for going into question one and thinking about starting off the discussion.
Great, thank you very much, Robin. And as Robin's already referred to, the chapters that our contributors have written for the book, and as perhaps you know, but maybe not, the book itself is available open access, so it's freely available. You can read all the chapters that have been referred to for free, and I hope that I think somebody from the MHPSS.net team will post the link in the chat if you want to access that later. What we're going to do today is not discuss the chapters as such, but to highlight the issues raised in those chapters through some examples and reflections from our contributors. So looking forward to getting going with this discussion. And the first question, which I would like to put to you all, I guess, and to hear from any of you who have something to share on this, is some of the chapters talk about different alternative ways of engaging with people who've experienced extremely distressing events through things like storytelling. And storytelling we know can be very powerful. So I'd like to invite any of you who are ready to tell us a story from your own experience that illustrates for you the power of therapeutic group work to build alternative narratives about experiences of trauma. Is anybody ready to share a story with us? Sorry, maybe just to repeat for the people who are joining this webinar, who are as participants as such. Unfortunately, you're not able to unmute and share at this point. What we'd ask you to do is to write any comments and reflections in the chat, and we'll certainly come back to you after our initial discussion. So I can see Ender's unmuted, but I don't know whether that means you have something you'd like to share. Oh, Wei, you do.
Yeah, happy to jump in, Rebecca. So again, my name is Wei, and the chapter I wrote about was set in Yemen, and that was back in 2019. And through the group, a lot of the participants talk about, being able to be kinder to themselves. And I thought it was very interesting that that was something that came out. And one of the quotes from a 19-year-old girl was that she talked about putting her problems to the side and to deal with herself kindly, recognizing that the problems don't necessarily go away, especially in the context of Yemen, where there's active conflict and displacement, but then to be able to care and to be kind to themselves. And also another participant actually said, they were less worried about what others thought about them. And that they were able to find solidarity within the group and was able to change the narrative on how they view themselves or how they were able to manage some of their stresses. And I thought those were really powerful quotes from the participants themselves.
Thank you. And especially the word solidarity struck me in what you said. So it's that being together is such a powerful thing, isn't it? The power of the togetherness is the subtitle of the book, and that illustrates that very well. Kirsten, yes, please.
For me, it was not just an individual story. I think it's the common story of all group work that is about being together in the present, and that's happens in different ways in the different types of groups, but being together in the present means, like Wei said, you're not alone, and you're not alone in your suffering. In my chapter, I think for me, the little story that illustrated this was the person who said at the end, even if you haven't spoken in the group, we had a ritual where everyone clapped at the end of the group together at the same time. And he said that even if you hadn't spoken in the group, you knew you were present and you had to be part of the ending ritual, otherwise it didn't work. So you were important and necessary, and you were part of something bigger than just yourself and your own suffering. So for me, I think the common story of groups is being with other people in the present, if that doesn't sound too simple.
Not well, it's simple to say, but perhaps not so simple to do. And that story from the end of your groups, the ritual where everyone claps together, I think is a really powerful way of showing that connectedness, isn't it? Because it's without counting, without any speaking, everyone having to sense when is the right moment to clap together. So even I love that even if you're not speaking, you're still connecting with each other through that moment at the end of the group. Thank you for sharing that with us. Andy, you've been unmuted for a while. Does that mean you have something to say, or is it?
I do, but not just yet.
Okay, sure. Mary, you've unmuted. Is that ready to speak?
That's a complete mistake, but what's just happened leads me directly to something Martha and I 100% believe in, which is the power of a cup of tea. We always ended our group in a circle, and tea was essential, and some bickies. And it was actually about constructing that sense of community, people who'd been together, and before they went off into their isolation, they had that ring of the cup of tea. So
Yeah, please add to that, Martha.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to add to what Kirsten and Mary have said about that kind of sense of togetherness in the present, and how that starts these new narratives. And I suppose because our work has always been nature-based, it's also about reconnecting with those kind of wider cycles within nature. So you're kind of connecting with yourself in that particular season, planting that particular bulb in the slightly cold, wet soil of October in London, and you're kind of building those connections with the people around you, but also again with the wider landscape.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you. Jeremy, yes, please. So your work is through music, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm standing on all of the contributors I have said, but what I'm going to say on top of this, that because personally I've joined the music group as a therapeutic group work, but what was special on that, everyone have a space in that group. It doesn't, regardless who you are or where you come from, or even if you don't have skill for music, but you have something to do in the group. So it was some kind of integration, also giving everyone a space of improvisation. So this was a space where people were connected to each other and also developing resilience to build new life in the UK, knowing that most of the group was made of people who went through human rights abuse and torture. So this is what was wonderful. And also the theme subject of music was just in the way that people, even you, lost all of this trust and confidence through the term. You will build your trust and your confidence to see that there is a light in the end of the tunnel, and then you can end up one day and build your new life.
Thank you. So we've heard that through music and through nature, it's possible to build these connections and work through some difficult feelings without necessarily talking directly about them. Peggy, did I see your hand raised?
Yeah, I was looking
Thank
for
you.
where to hands up, but I couldn't find it, so I was just like that. Yeah, I mean, what is really interesting part of this work, we've learned from each contributor, and I think that everybody demonstrated like this kind of diversity in giving the best to the people we are supporting via art, creative art. Personally, I've adopted kind of creative art part of my therapy, especially with the group of patients or clients I'm working with. I focused on female genital mutilation, which is in this book, demonstrating one of the models that I've been using. My patients are mainly those who have been through FGM or sexual trauma, as a psychosexual therapist as well. And talking or healing just with words has been very difficult. And then it was just like, how can we do it? And creativity we've used 3 different types of creative art. We started with places, with geographical map, and bearing in mind that all of them are migrants, first of all, and integrating this sense of considering that places where they live and how they feel about it was powerful as well as just drawing. So we gave them the opportunity to just demonstrate, express themselves, express their feelings via any form of creative art they wanted to use. Some of them have been drawing, others have been kind of just writing as poetry. But we've captured this with images, and then we've been kind of exhibiting this. it was a way for them to kind of free themselves part of that, kind of becoming more healed, but at the same time sharing their stories. And there was a kind of a power coming from that, which empowered those who have been able to do that to support other women in the group work. And then we developed that kind of the SOS model based on that, and which I'm still researching in terms of making it more recognized academically. Yeah, so I want to just emphasize in the importance of not neglecting art as part of our healing process for people from ethnic minorities.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Enda. Yeah, please build on that.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on to what Peggy said, and also what you said earlier, Rebecca, about indirect. And I think I agree with Peggy, having a range of different art modalities for people to explain, having a pizza of practice, or what might suit one doesn't suit another, and I think is helpful, and it also can encourage people to be curious and to start being curious about exploring and expressing through other, art, poetry, dance, music, embodiment, sculpt. All of these ways can really help promote this deeper dialogue within people and between them. And as you know, those little moments of trust and sharing become the glue that can hold the group through more authentic sharing, or stories that are difficult or shame-ridden. So any object, as you know, that promotes that indirectness, that safety, I'm telling my story through this artwork, lends to that safety, lends to that person getting a little bit more of their confidence back, helps them to be curious. And through all of these art modalities, the great ingredient I think that's really helpful is of discovery. They're discovering strengths within themselves, or they're just discovering strengths they had lost in the past and forgotten. So this aspect of discovery through creative expression is a very, very powerful way to help people connect up to more of themselves and to more of others.
I was just going to say that, and to more of others as well, to connect with each other as well as with parts of themselves. And I love the way you describe that, Enda. And in your chapter, of course, you draw on lots of different modalities, don't you, with poetry, movement, theatre.
Because some, like I remember working with a group of women in Syria, some, they would say, no, we don't do dance, we don't do drama, we can do poetry. So let's try poetry, and then we can go into poetry and we can find a line that resonates, that then can be taken to action, or it can be amplified or become a chorus within the group, and people can get turns to offer things that again adds to that sense of solidarity and the safety and the maybe I can trust you. That is all part of particularly the early group formation.
Great, thank you. Oh yes, Amanda, and or Peggy, did you want to respond to Enda before we come to Amanda?
I cannot see.
Oh, I thought you were muted and looked like you wanted to respond.
Oh no, I think
No.
what I'm saying is kind of the type of approach that I'm using. It's just about making them feel in control as well.
Yeah.
I can choose my way of expressing, it's giving them that power as well, straight from how do you want to say your story. So yeah, this is very important. Maybe one thing I can add is as a researcher, I've been personally often challenged in terms of using creative art as a methodology, but nothing would make me change, especially with ethnic minorities, that this is for me like what I found being the suitable methodology in terms of even conducting research or supporting. Yes.
Thank you. And we could certainly have another webinar around the challenges of doing evaluations around creative methodologies and demonstrating their effectiveness, but we won't. We'll hold that for now, but thank you for raising that. Let's come to you, Amanda, and then I think we've got another set of issues that I'll hand over to Robin and we can start to explore. But yes, please go ahead, Amanda.
Yes, I just wanted to add to that sense of the group work, the coming together in the group to do this creative art, because we too in our groups were doing creative art using paints, but also tactile modeling materials as well, which is very, very helpful for people who haven't always been able to express, or certainly not express through words, but they found they were able to express using these kinds of media. And as the group became more trusting together and shared more, that actually was extraordinarily positive what came out, even though the images are obviously in some cases are of the previous trauma, but the fact that they were able to bear witness and, you know, within the group was incredibly important. And there was that sense of coming together and sharing the playfulness that creative art offers, which is an incredible, it just seems a very, very key part of it as well, because it actually allowed people to explore a part of themselves that had probably been buried by some of the traumatic been through, and that they appreciate that we're talking about now.
Thank you. Did you want to respond to that, Martha? I saw your hand. Oh.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on those moments of playfulness and yeah, moments in the groups which maybe people wouldn't really assume, but we had so much fun in the garden, and that was a lot of the feedback that we got. Was just, I remember one woman saying, we just laughed and laughed and laughed in the garden. And I think it was an opportunity to take people into a different space, into a different mode of operating, and therefore it just freed people. Yeah, and that was a really important part of it, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on that.
Please do.
Because I think it's very interesting there what you said, Martha, particularly about people feeling confident and playful. I think is a really critical aspect of this work, because what we're really trying to get with it is spontaneity. So when people are playing in the group, when there's a bit of trust, how we play is how we are. There's no self-censoring. If I'm giving and receiving, I'm able to give and receive. It can be a very powerful, non-shaming way for people to develop self-awareness. Oh, was I able to receive from that person through a non-verbal exercise? Was I able to give, like, build on their ideas? People can build up very strong self-awareness about whether they were able to or not, or is this an area they need to grow in, without a facilitator or teacher telling them, hey, you didn't do that well. You know, so again, I think that's a very important healing aspect for people, particularly who've been shamed or with low self-confidence, that they are taken through a ritual of collaborative exercises, and these exercises promote the spontaneity that enable the ingredients of relationships, collaboration, negotiation, giving and receiving, trust, all of these things to be experienced, not to be talked about, but to regularly be experienced, which all adds to the solidarity and the trust, I think.
Yeah, please come in, Kirsten. Sorry, you're still muted.
One of the things we did following on from Anders was inviting group members to give each other imaginary gifts, because obviously people didn't have resources to do any gift exchanges, but imaginary gifts, they really loved it, because it was doing all the things that you were saying, Ander, about connecting with each other, but also revealing themselves in terms of what they would like to have for themselves as well as to others.
Yeah, yeah, it's so important.
Thank
Shall I
you.
pick-
Oh yes, I was just
Shall I
about to
pick
hand
up here,
over,
Rebecca?
Robin.
Yeah,
Yes,
because I
please,
think
go ahead.
we've really gone into, it's just fascinating listening to the things that you're talking about. And I think we've merged into the second area we were going to think about, which was really about what are some of the factors that you feel really make your group work approaches successful and make them work. And, you know, what we've heard already is that there are these different mediums that all of you are using. Some of you are using multiple ones. Some of them is just one. It's just music or just arts or a whole gamut of those approaches. And in fact, in other chapters in the book, there's talk about sewing, about football. So in a way, there's probably an endless type of media that we could use in that sort of that pizza of practice way that you talked about, Enda. So it sounds like people might be kind of quite allied to a particular approach, or their service user group might be allied to a particular approach. But it sounds like it's more than that. And I think that's where you've been going into, is you've been talking about safety, confidence, that indirectness, the discovery, the playfulness. And I wonder if we can go on and hear more from you about what you feel are really the core features that make the groups work, you feel. And then we'll come afterwards maybe onto areas where you feel whether there's factors that make it more difficult. But starting off with just continuing to hear from you about the features of the groups that you've run that you feel really are working. So it's a bit of a continuation. Anyone want to pick up any of those ideas? Yeah, Kirsten.
I had a list in preparation, and the bottom of my list was groups that allow people to show different parts of their personalities. Like they can take care of other people when they're upset, or they can protect others from too much distress, or they can challenge and have fun, and be curious. So for me, that was one of the big things in my group, is seeing people take on different roles within the group, demonstrating bits of their personality that might have got lost or doesn't come out in an individual one-to-one relationship.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. And it sounds like you do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I particularly the role thing, you know, it's really important to be aware of what roles people play when they come in, and are they playing any roles that perhaps they need to play less of, and what roles may they need to play more of, and then finding a creative forum where they can practice that, or through a drama they can practice those skills and get a bit more confidence. That's really, I find that really helpful. Yeah. I have a couple of things, I'm sure other people have them the same, that I found over the years very helpful. And the first one, I suppose, is the container, or what I call tilling the soil. It's getting ready, getting the boat ready or the airplane ready before it leaves the airport. So, and I'm referring to two groups. I worked with one in Hanoi with trafficked women, and one in Yemen, and the buy-in, I think, is very important. Helping participants to consider, do they have the time to commit, the will to commit, what might they like to see themselves at the end of it, to help them through a pre-starter session, consider what are some of the blocks they might face and what are some of the resources they can draw on to use that. And very often a good way to do that is to physicalize it like a maze. I call it monsters, and other participants embody the blocks and voice the blocks that the person might have, prevent them from completing the course. So it gives gives their organization from an organization, gives them all a better sense of what to expect and what the methodology will be. Are they still able to commit at the end of that? As well as introducing this habit of reflection, I think, is really important throughout. At the end of each module, when it's appropriate, after a few sessions, that the people, the participants, are empowered to be at the center of their own change process by capturing regularly through these reflections the very small incremental little steps of hope and courage and strength that they have gotten, you know, the adversity impacted developments, you know, not very, you know, how the wounds can be so big that we can get lost in them. So being able to capture and amplify any little incremental growth or healing, it is powerful, particularly at the end, when a year later, at the end of the course, people look back and they discover things that they didn't consider important, yet they've had a huge impact in their relationships with themselves and others. So that attention to reflection and baselining at the beginning and the end is a very powerful factor for participants at the end, when they look at all the different artworks that represent struggles, represent strengths, things they overcame, hurts they had. All of these things can be very powerful in forming that sense of progress for them.
There's so much in that you've just brought in there, Enda, but and one of the things that seemed to run through that was the idea of groups having a life with beginnings, middles, and ends, and different things, you know, might run through that whole time, or there might be particular aspects at different points of the group. I'm not sure if, and I know from reading the chapters in the book that a lot of, I think all maybe of the approaches do think about those kind of areas of, you know, particularly the engagement being so important, but also those different stages that a lot of people talked about as part of their programs. Anything anyone wants to add on that kind of aspect of the groups, the journey of groups, I guess?
Robin, happy to add on that. You know, I think that in the journey of the groups, it's also very important to establish routines and rituals for the group themselves. So from the very beginning, what are some of the things that you would do to start the group or to end the group, to create that routine and rituals? In the context that I work in, which is a lot of displacement context, all your routines and rituals are out the windows. And so as you reestablish that routine and ritual in the group, you remind the group too about their own routines and rituals. And a lot of the things that come up, especially in the Middle East where I work, we talk about, you know, what do you stop doing? Maybe I stopped praying 5 times, I stopped going to the mosque. But then through the group work, because of the routines and rituals, you start thinking, oh, actually, it was really nice to go to the mosque, and then after that have the meals with my family, and Friday was that day, and that's the kind of ritual I need to reestablish. And it's also about creating, like, you know, having skilled facilitators that creates a safe space for different perspectives, and having I think it's also very helpful to have a mixed group where they're at different progression of their healing process, because you can see different people giving different perspective and helping people relook. And a lot of, in my chapter, we talk a lot about the faith-sensitive approach, where you allow people to explore what it means for them, and consequently having different perspective of, you know, how people practice their faith and this different spectrum of the faith allows people to have a safe space to say, oh, I can practice it this way, and to allow that opportunity, right, to do what's right for them. And so I see that's also another success factor in terms of the skilled facilitators to be able to create that judgment-free space. And obviously the sense of group, because once you have a sense of group, especially in a context where the communities are very close, or the facilitators come from the communities, then you need them to have that sense of belonging, so that they will protect the confidentiality, they will protect each other, and they will walk with each other, and they recognize that. So I think those are some other factors that was really, you know, important in terms of the work we do.
Thanks. Yeah, really going into some of the qualities that are part of that journey. Peggy, were you going to come in?
Yes, just to add, I mean, just completing what I've just heard, I think there's a lot of commonalities. And but in my group, considering the vulnerability and the sensitivity of the topics discussed, we were offering initially like kind of one-to-one individual, and then for them to go to be referred to the group work, they felt really valued. Especially because they realize that we are not on our own, we are not isolated, so we are not the only ones going through this type of issues. And then they felt safe and in control as well, as feeling proud to have been associated in, for example, the planning of activities, the delivery of the group sessions. The majority of the women who've completed all the program through the group, they've said that they felt empowered to really express themselves. So not only feeling emotional healed, but they came out of the group with some extra skills. Some of them, for example, in terms of leadership, because part of the group therapy, those survivors or those who've already been through healing, they were trained to become peer mentors to support the others. So it was kind of valued as well, working alongside other professionals. So I think what made me proud, really, it was really about like their reflection on their emotions, but not only on their emotions, but how they bound together. Many of them as well said that it was a new experience for them, but they were keen to kind of share it and then take this forward. So it's the dynamic of the group was really felt, the support, the friendship developed, and sharing, of course. For example, during the sessions could be like sharing their own cultures. They were coming from different cultures. They've been through different forms of abuse within that sphere because it's not standard. So psychoeducation and sharing has been very, very powerful and strong as well. So yeah, it was really a kind of a significant, the group work was significant part of their healing journey. Yeah.
And again, so many different features you're describing there as part of that process, whether it's, you know, the idea of having some individual meetings as a way of creating some safety to take into the group, or the idea of peer mentors, maybe at the other end of the journey, in terms of thinking, how do people continue that support and take it forward? It's really interesting ideas. Yeah, Jeremy, you've got your hand up, and then Andrew, I think you want to come as well. Let's hear from you, Jeremy.
Okay, thank you. What I can complete is that from my group, we had, there were 3 different stages, starting from writing song. When we write, there is no barrier, there is no language barrier or culture. Each song can contain different language in one song. And also, once we have writing the song, we start rehearsing the song, do the repetition so people can repeat and then understand what we have to deliver. But the most part important of the program was, in the end, we need to do a public performances. On that point, we invite famous musicians in the UK to join the group, so you can see, even if you are less confident to perform, but when you are working alongside with people who are famous in the UK in the same stage, is inspiring you and also giving you power to deliver. So it was one of the best moments we have had with the team. Personally, I did many performances in the UK, London, Leeds, and everywhere. Now I'm known as a singer, but before joining the group, the music group, I was not a singer. I did not even know to sing or to write something. But the opportunity given to all the service users was more powerful, and then unlock strength and skill that people have to deliver, and then to have opportunity for the voice to be also heard to the public. I can recall one of the song we made, which gave even the name of the album Ngunda Azalimoto. It was like activism song that we were addressing a message to tell to decision maker that people in the UK who are seeking for sanctuary are not illegal, like we listen to the stereotype, but there are people with more quality. Among them, we have physicians, we have doctors, we have mechanicians, we have lecturer. We have all of the quality within those people, but they have been destroyed from the human rights abuse and torture. So giving them this opportunity, it was one of the second or chance to rebuild the life, and if they can be protected so they can deliver, because healing someone from this point is also healing the society we are living in.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear. I think, you know, of all the chapters, your project really brought to life that idea of that empowerment through taking what happens in the group further and out, whether it's through performance, like you're talking about in an amazing way. I noticed there's a question about sport that's come up that we'll come back to later. Maybe that's another way of sort of taking group work out into a sporting arena. There's also a question about protest we'll come to, which is another sort of activism way. But that idea of the empowerment through performance is very special in the chapter, Jeremy. I'm really conscious of time and wanting to make sure we got room for the questions as well that people are putting in. I wonder if, Rebecca, you take on the next question. I know there are some things that people are on the edge of wanting to bring in as well, and maybe you can incorporate those in the next question as well, so that we can get a balance of the different areas.
Thank you. Yeah, so we've heard about so many of the positive aspects of this type of work and the approaches that you're using. I suppose before we do come to some of these interesting questions we're seeing in the chat, and please, anybody add to those. We do have limited time, but we'd love to address some of the issues that are on your minds. Maybe I could ask you to reflect on whether there are any, well, I'm sure there are, but whether to reflect on and share with us some of the challenges that might be involved in the kind of work that we're talking about here. Maybe there are factors that can derail it or can send it in wrong directions. Maybe there are some contexts in which it could potentially be harmful, and these might be things that we need to keep in mind. Does anybody have any immediate thoughts on that? The challenges, potential harmful context in which this is done? Yes, Martha, please. Oh, you're still muted though.
Yeah, I guess this sort of builds a bit on the things that I was about to say before, actually, because I guess some of the things that I think are quite important for nature-based work is to know what you're offering, because I am not a therapist, but I worked alongside Mary for many years, and I've also worked in these sorts of contexts without someone like Mary. And the way that you work is very different in terms of knowing what you are offering and what level you are able to support people. And so I think that that's one of the things which is both key to success, is around how you build the group, but it's also a potential area of danger, because you have to know that you have the correct support in place. When you're inviting people who are in vulnerable situations, I think there's a lot to be said for humility and knowing your limitations and being very clear about what you can and can't offer. Because if you're working with people with multiple complex needs, you may well not be able to meet lots of those. And some of the situations where I've had really good experiences have also been about other people within an organization picking up needs around housing, around, you know, healthcare, things like this, which has then made people more able to focus on working with us in nature. So I think there's sorts of many aspects of maybe the containment and the support structures which can support the work. And so I suppose before setting off outdoors, it's knowing what you're getting yourself into, and also who you're going to meet outdoors, because garden and outdoor spaces are very different, and taking a group of vulnerable people into an outdoor space, again, you need to think about who you will meet, and if you will meet other people, and what those encounters will be like, because those experiences can be very healing, but they can also be challenging. So I suppose these are some of the things that I would think about around this type of work.
Thank you so much. I think, and thanks for your notes in the chat, Sareti. It is a really important point that you're making there, Martha, and I see lots of nodding going on on the screen in front of me. Would anybody like to build on what we've just heard? Where you look like, or shall we go, Peggy? Away then, Peggy. I saw. Sorry.
Completely agree, you know, and it's about having the safety, right? Because a lot of times, at least in the context I work in, is finding a safe space. And a lot of times in the community, in a village, that where is the safe space? And just bringing up a different example, I was in Mount Lebanon just last month, working with survivors of GBV, and as part of it was looking for a place where the women themselves and the girls themselves recognize as safe space. And it was quite interesting that the places they choose is actually another survivor's home. And that was where they found the safety, not a community center, not, you know, but having them participate in the process. And I think that's really important, right? Because they are the one who identify that we can all meet in this girl's home, and that was where we would feel most comfortable. But at the same time, also recognizing that, you know, there are really high risk cases that sometimes is not perhaps the most appropriate right now to join the group. They could join at some point, but perhaps it was better for them to seek higher level type of services first prior to coming, and knowing what those services are, especially for in Thais, we struggle to find where we could refer people if they were suicidal. And if we didn't have thought through how we were going to do it, transportation, and then we identify a case, then it's a basic do no harm that we needed to make sure that happened. So I think it's those are some of those things to that really deep, you know, you said, you know, success and factors that affected this would be some of the things to think about.
Thank you, Wei. Peggy, yes, please come in.
Yeah, I feel like they've just said everything that I would like to say, and I agree it's not an easy, as much as we can talk about the success, how good these approaches are, they always come with challenges. In our case, we needed to kind of reframe our structure in terms of space, time, and self. So again, which is just like everything they've said about safe, making space, making sure defining what is a safe space. It was difficult at the beginning because we have been offered different places where we could run our women group, but women were not comfortable, starting from even just community centers or healthcare centers. They were not the best places until we found where exactly. It was just about finding from their definition of safe space. Talking about time, this was as well a challenge in terms of flexibility, to make sure that you can accommodate all the women attending the group work. So talking about mothers, talking about some of them still being in coercive relationships. So we needed to adopt as well, just after COVID, we adopted like a hybrid approach, and then we adopted as well specific times guided by the woman to make sure that they are safe again to open up and talk when they are there face to face or online. And then at the other challenge was we put it under the theme of self. So there will be journeying. It was very important when we talk about doing an assessment that who needs to be in that group in terms of the level of distress, the level of support needed. And we needed to consider all this in terms of kind of reframing our groups based on the assessments. And for example, like I was saying before, we always spend time to provide like a one-to-one first before directing into the group. So all these were very kind of the challenges that we needed to raise in developing this program.
Can I add on to that, Peggy?
Yeah.
It was very helpful. I just wanted to add on, similar to yourself and Wade, particularly about space, and what can sabotage it very often is this lack of shared vision between management and other people in the organization. And I found that particularly with WFP, you're constantly advocating for resources for space, you know, and some organizations, they approach such group work as a training. And so they give you a room with it's got a load of rote desks in it. There's no space. So you're constantly having to advocate and develop this shared vision with all of these managers. Otherwise, the organization unconsciously sabotages what this type of work tries to grow. And a couple of other things that just came to mind that I wanted to talk about them as strengths in the group, but I think their absence can also be detrimental. And one thing I've noticed is that very important in the first parts of the group, when we're working on the trust and the relationships in particular, very often people's experiences of their experiences of education and school have often been characterized by rote and top down and shame and rebuke. Very often the participants, that's their experience of feedback. It can be threatening, it's uneven, or it's laughing at other people's artwork. Or so working on being able to give feedback between people in non-violent ways or non-disrespectful ways, again, is part of the early group work, and again done through exercise, non-verbal exercises, that really builds up people's ability to appreciate and to communicate, which only increases the trust, you know. And again, I'm always amazed how many their experiences of feedback has been just top down, derogatory, disrespectful, and that's how they know then how to communicate. The other area I mentioned that I think is really critical, and particularly its absence, is the issue of power that is woven through everything. And I think we have to find ways in such workshops to enable people to connect to their own power, to recognize it, to be able to name it, to be able to name different types of powers that they expressed. All of these things are very powerful. It increases the language within the group when they have a better awareness of what power they used or had abused against them. And also it can be very playful, again, through role, to inhabit powerful roles. I remember a woman in Turkey, and she was very quiet, but once she was in the role, she really connected to a power that she had been taught to hide from. So just, it was a lovely moment of freedom, and she got so much joy out of it, and repeat that over a few months, and then she leaves with that. Who was it said earlier about roles? That's a role that she's taken on and recognizes and plays with more awareness than before. So yeah, power and feedback.
Thank you. And I think that particular example, I think you describe in a bit more detail in the chapter, if I remember. I think you do. It's a while ago, isn't it? Thanks for sharing that with us. I do want to I'm kind of reluctant to drag us away from this really fascinating discussion, but I also want to leave a few minutes to address some of the questions that have been put in the chat. So Robin, was there something that you think we could begin with? Oh, you're muted.
Thanks. Yeah, there's a few questions that are kind of picking up on different things, I think, and all really interesting. So there's one that asks about the role of sport as it's been used and how one might measure the benefits. And there's been a couple of answers in the chat about that, pointing to different areas. There's also a question about the quality of the space and the interaction. I think we've been talking a little bit about, but we could talk more about. There's also a question about activism and supporting participants in group work to sort of take on activism roles. So there's a lot of really interesting questions. Should we? What do you think is best to start with, Rebecca? Have you got any goes on that in terms of where we've got to?
I also noticed there's an interesting question from Lynn that builds on a discussion we began in our last webinar. It's in the WhatsApp group, Robin, where Peggy's comments on survivor-led therapeutic activities is interesting. My organisation's work with torture survivors is survivor implemented. Have other groups experienced things around capacitating survivors to provide support? And we did start to discuss this, I think, in the last webinar. Maybe we can come back to that. But maybe I think we could start with the sport issue, just to mention, yes, there's a couple of we do have a chapter on football as a therapeutic group work approach in the book, and that author, Terry, is not able to join us today, but that chapter is there if you'd like to look at it. And we've got a few, thank you to those people who have posted in the chat some interesting articles around sport. Robin, I don't know if this is inappropriate, but you've been involved, haven't you, in football groups for survivors of torture? And I wondered whether, since we don't have Terry with us, whether you might like to say anything on that.
Yeah, so the one I posted was in fact one that you wrote, Rebecca. It was that research you did about the football group in London. And then the chapter that Terry wrote was about a football group in Manchester. And I mean, I think the thing that strikes me about both of them, it really follows on from what Jeremy was talking about in terms of, you know, that taking a group from a place of connecting and joining and building confidence into one of kind of performing. And, you know, in sport, that doesn't necessarily have to be sort of performing in front of people like Stone Flowers, but it's one of actually of participating in an activity communally. Comes out of the football group. And some of the points that people have been making about the safety, how do you create safety to do that, and what might be some of the obstacles to running groups where you are taking it out into the community and moving from, you know, what traditionally is seen as a sort of therapeutic safe space that's divided off in a way to create that safety. How do you then make that move to take that into a broader communal space? Are some of the really interesting things about that. And I think what this work shows, and what all of the chapters and the discussions you're having today show, is that those things are possible, and that there's real gains to be had from taking that journey all the way from quite a sort of closed, safe, intimate space of building trust that might be in a garden, or it might be a talking group, or it might be an arts group, and any of the groups you're talking about, but moving from that space into something that's more outward looking, outward facing, and more connecting with a broader community. And that might be through peer support programs, or it might be through the kind of performance things, or it might be through activism. And that's obviously a whole area as well, as thinking about survivor activism as part of the journey. Anything anyone wants to add to that? Just that idea of sport, but of also moving from a more space outward. Mary.
not really with the sport, because that's not something we've been engaged with, but right through this, I've been thinking the critical issue here is timing. Finding the appropriate time to put people into an appropriate group so that people don't find themselves way out of their depth because actually they're close to suicidal and shouldn't be in a group at all. So there's a sort of timing issue about who goes where. And then I think there's something about how we model what we do. There was a little bit of talk here about top-down teaching. I think it's absolutely critical that we are together with the people we're working with and that we move at the pace that they're ready to work at. I'm swinging around all over the place, but I want to come to the activism, where I'm involved in an organization where we have both a very important casework support kind of program and a very strong activist campaigning program. I have seen in this organization and in other organizations, people, because they seem to be ready, being put into a situation where they are becoming the mouthpiece of an organization and in a sense become a little bit manipulated by that organization long before they're actually ready to understand what they're letting themselves in for. So I guess my overall thing would be timing on all this. I can't really go into it more now. I don't want to take the space, but I think it's critical.
Thanks, Mary. And I think that sort of begins to go into answering that question from Marianne about the role of protest. How we work with human rights survivors who want to attend public protests about human rights abuses. And it sounds like what you're talking about timing there, but also about power and how do we not make those decisions for people as well? How do we support people but not make the decisions for people? How do we position ourselves but also avoid positioning people so that they make their own choices? Others on that question? Anyone?
Robin, if I could jump in here. Was just thinking of sports, going back to sports. It's quite interesting. Ted Dizom, that the organization I'm working with right now, we have a sports group in Palestinian camp in Lebanon. And the idea was a space to give the children to come and express themselves, to play. But there is this worry where when you're trying to get facilitators to also do sports, because sports draw in the children, but at the same time, you have the issue of the sports coach that are really about the sports itself. And so there is this fine balance of, we realize the best thing to do, even in Egypt when we're running this football programs, is having a refugee facilitator along with the sports coach, and then having to balance that out so it doesn't go too much of a sports and competition and everybody needing to be very cutthroat to, losing the therapeutic sense of things. So I think that what we learned was, yes, the kids come for the games, but also at the same time, we need that balance of our facilitators for the group. Then the other thing about the survivors movement, I completely agree with you. I think if you look at South Africa, where for Tear Fund, for instance, where they have survivors coming out as a movement, they decided on their own timing, they were ready to speak out, and they were going to get the church actually to change their rhetoric about what a sexual survivor meant and how the church could support them. Or in Cambodia, if you look at the sex workers movement, where they chose to step up and they were ready to say that we should be treated, fairly and equally, and not to be looked down upon. And so I think it's, as you said, survivor-centered, right? And giving people the time and space when they're ready to do what they see as appropriate. And so consequently, it's when you build into a therapeutic process, it's also allowing that those who want to continue, those who want to bring this into movement, how could they be supported to continue that process? I think it's very important for us to take that into consideration and not just say, oh, the programming has finished, my funding has ended, and consequently, that's it. I don't know how to help you moving forward. I think that's very important to look into.
Thanks, great. Yeah, Peggy.
Yeah, I wanted just to emphasize our experience of using peer mentors, like the peer mentor program. So because they are all, they've been through the therapy and they are all part of that particular group of sexual survivors. And we know that it's not easy when we talk about safe space or safety for in therapy, like for clients to just open up or just developing therapeutic relationship is not easy. So we've been using this approach with peer mentors who are trained to develop basic cross-cultural counseling skills. And then they'll be able to support their peers because they are seeing themselves through this woman because they know that they've been through the same experience. And then, so what is happening with the training as well? They develop, peer mentors will be developing a solution-focused approach during the learning process. So they are really paraprofessional. It's a paraprofessional role, and their involvement in the group work, we've noticed that has been crucial at a point that when we say self-center, it is really successful. They are often described by group members as role models, and they are like kind of a real proof as well of successful healing and empowerment. Sorry, group members, for example, who do not speak English, because we use them as well based on the different cultures where they are coming from. So being that language sometimes is very difficult in England, so mixing cultures. So we having the peer mentors, making sure that they speak different language, and then just receiving that form of support in your own maternal language is valued. So make them like feeling like they are cared for and they are understood. So this is a model that we've been using for about 7 years. Well, that won an award in nationally in England in that particular area. So we are still working and developing and making it better each time, ensuring that the safety of the woman we are supporting.
If maybe I could just jump in quickly. Thank you, Peggy, and I think that goes towards the issue that Lynn was raising in her question about how we go about working with survivor-led groups and ensuring that the people who are leading those groups are not only well trained, but of course well supported to enable them to support others. So I think that example is a really helpful one for us to hear about. Peggy, thank you. I wondered whether anybody else might have some thoughts on Lynn's question, which was, I shall read it again. My organization's work. So Lynn works with Tree of Life in Zimbabwe, and that organization's work with torture survivors is survivor implemented. So she was asking the question about your experiences with capacitating survivors to provide support. And of course, Stone Flowers, Jeremy, is entirely survivor-led, isn't it? So you have that experience, but maybe I think the group in Yemen that you wrote about, Wei, also was facilitated by people from that community. So I wondered whether anybody has anything they could share on this.
Yeah,
Jeremy.
I think myself, I've took part of different projects. Even Terry, if Terry is not here, I've been part of the football project in Manchester. We had a contract with Manchester United to provide us the trainers and also bring us to the ground every Thursday to play. So Survivor has had the opportunity to go to the Manchester United ground to play football every Thursday and meet professional trainers. So it was a good experience because we were connected. One of the challenges was, as Peggy said, because the group is where the team was made with people from different countries. So the language barrier. So, you know, when you are in a team and we need to communicate, but if sometimes there is a issue or barrier of communication, so we need to maybe use some language sign or interpreter, but we could not bring interpreter in the ground. So this was one of the challenge. But about the survival led in Manchester, we have now a post called lived experience support worker is a post created for a service user who have been a victim of torture, and then he has a right to work in the UK, so they can apply for this role. It doesn't need if you have experience or not, but the role will be people will be working alongside with clinician to provide a therapy in the group setting. In Manchester and in Frame Foundation, we have a stabilization program for all the clients who are in the waiting list, while they are waiting to be allocated to receive proper treatment with a clinician. So in meantime, the stabilization group will help them to learn new skill, how they can deal with trauma, all of the PSTD. So in this setting, we are now exploring to use people with the lived experience so they can be part of the group to provide clinical service to torture survivors. So myself, I've been part of one of the pilots. What was amazed is that in the end of the session, because the program has 9 weeks, in the end of the session, some feedback. One of the most of the clients say that having a torture survivor in the setting group was like seeing the light in the end of the tunnel. So they can see where they can end up if they engage with treatment. So it was one of the amazing experience. About the activism, I've been part of SSO, Service Survivor Speak Out group, which is based in London, but we are working across the UK. We do a lot of activism, even for Rwanda, the flight, the plan was stopped. We were part of the organization who stand to fight that approach. But the challenge on this aspect is most about clients who have not yet been granted to stay in the UK, because they might put themselves at risk, but it's a choice based. So you cannot involve in the activism if you are not sure about your safety. So we check everything to make sure that if people will be involving in activism area, so they have they are sure that they might not put themselves at risk of being traced or tracked from the country of origin, because most of our clients are people who have been fled country to seek for sanctuary in the UK.
Thank you, Jeremy. You addressed several of the issues that were raised there from your own experience. So that was really powerful. Thank you so much. Mary, yes, please. Oh, you're still muted. Oh, there you go.
Just coming to the people with lived experience. In one of the organizations I work with, we very recently hired a young woman to be a caseworker who has herself been right through the whole process and having had horrendous experiences. The thing that I have learned, even in the couple of months I've worked with her, is for her the critical issue is how quickly and safely can we encourage the people we're working with to move away from refugee support organizations? Because she says that her headset was, I'm a refugee, this is my space. And she's begun to see that actually the future depends on safely moving out of that. So I think part of what is incumbent on us is to know where to signpost people out of this area that we all work so hard in. And that's been a new experience for me.
Yes, Wei, thank you.
No, just trying to wrap up too, is that when looking for a facilitator, when we first started, because everybody was a survivor, right? And in some ways it was just really hard to even begin because nobody has gone through the process. And so what we ended up doing was looking for the natural helpers. And they among the survivors and natural helpers, they're people that come out and they just want to be able to be there for the people in their community. And so those were the people we recruited first. And then through that, they actually we go through the participant process. They went through the group work as a participant. And from there, after they've experienced it, among them we ask, who among you would want to step up and do this for others? And they volunteered themselves. So the first part is getting the community to say, who do you trust? Who are your natural helpers in your community? You select them. They go through the group work, at least that was the process we followed, and then they then stepped up and said, okay, we want to do this. And I felt like that really helped us in identifying who was appropriate.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, that process took place in Yemen, didn't it? So it was actually during an ongoing conflict. So thank you. And I saw quite a lot of nodding as you were speaking. So people clearly recognize the role of natural helpers in responding. Peggy, maybe, yes.
Just a quick comment. I want to just say, when we talk about people with lived experience and how good they can be, but we need to look after them as well in terms of making sure that clinical supervision and then support, how much we are supporting those people is very important, because the danger would be you're using them and then not looking at their own well-being, could be maybe bringing re-traumatization or things like that. So I wanted just to point out the importance of clinical supervision for those particular people with lived experience who are actively involved in our project. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a really key point, isn't it, that we do need to keep in mind. And I see that we are getting close to the end, so maybe that might be a good point for us to end on. Unless anyone has anything that they would like to bring in before we do close, we've just got a couple of minutes, or Robin, if there's anything you think we've missed that it would be good to highlight. Thank you, Anna, for putting again in the chat the link to the free version of the book, so you can read more about these approaches that people have been mentioning. Sorry, Robin.
I was just going to say, any last thoughts from the contributors from the panel? Any last thoughts that anyone had been holding on to on anything that we've talked about?
I see thoughtful faces, but no one's actually speaking. So thank you so much for sharing all your experiences, your thoughts, your reflections. As Anand has put in the chat, there's just a very short question poll on the screens to provide a bit of feedback on this webinar. And thank you, Lynn, for your appreciation. It was very interesting, with so many insights that were new to me, despite having edited several of the chapters that were discussed here. And it's interesting, Lynn, that you found what's been discussed today relevant to your organisation there in Zimbabwe. I hope that others who've been listening in also found insights which are relevant to your work. I found it fascinating, and along with the first webinar, this one will also be available online. I think the recording will be going up within a few days. So if there are people who wanted to join, but it wasn't a convenient time, we can share the recording with them. So there's still an opportunity to do that. Valeria or Ananda, is there anything else that we should say before closing?
Not really, except to just thank all of you for the time and for sharing with us. It's been a pleasure to host the webinar, and we hope that you'll be back to continue the conversations in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for hosting, and thanks to all the contributors. It's been a really rich discussion. I've enjoyed it a lot.